and Daniela weren't allowed to talk to me. The only family I had alive was my mom. As soon as I was 18 years of age, I signed up for school. I studied psychology, and I wanted to understand why my mom did what she did. Over the years, I not only changed my name, but changed my look. My hair was now cut short and dyed red. My goal was to get the chance to work at the women's prison where my mom was incarcerated. I knew, however, that they wouldn't allow me to work there if they knew my mother was in the system. After 20 years, I finally made my way down the halls of the women's prison as Dr. Elizabeth Ignace. "So, Mrs. Burns, would you like some tea?" I asked as I looked at my mother. She had aged considerably during her time in the prison. "My mother and I have been having sessions for the past year." "I would love some," she nodded. About 15 minutes after drinking the tea, I watched as my mother doubled over in pain. She looked up at me as her nose began to bleed. I opened the door and shouted, "Guard!" before I knelt next to my mother and whispered in her ear, "I have waited 20 years for this. May my father finally rest in peace." Hi, my name is Tiffany. Before I continue my story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification button. If you do, you will find $500 in cash soon. Trust me, it really works.
The first major fact that made me realize something was different about me was a biology class. I was so confused and furious with my parents. They explained that as I went through puberty, my body would begin to change. My name is Justin, and I was born by gender. This is my story, and it's hard to say if it's the tale of a girl or a boy. I was born with both male and female private parts. The doctors were incredibly surprised, as you can imagine. My parents were shocked. The doctor told her she was expecting a boy. My dad was overjoyed. He threw a big party to reveal my gender, and blue balloons filled the backyard. The walls were painted blue. The toys and clothes they bought were meant for a boy. Instead, my mom delivered me, someone between genders. They supported me every step of the way, even when I was struggling with my identity. That being said, they did mess up when it came to my upbringing. Instead of letting me know there was something different about me, they kept this a secret from me. The doctors and my parents didn't know what my main gender was, so for the time being, they didn't add any on my birth certificate. It was left blank. They decided, however, to raise me as a boy. To keep my condition a secret from my family, they had to keep anyone but the both of them from changing my diapers when I was a baby. As a kid, I didn't know anything was different about me. I carried my hair short and wore boys' clothes, so no one suspected a thing. I played soccer and went to the boys' bathrooms at school. I had a blissfully normal childhood, but that would soon change. Puberty and middle school arrived, and both of these would completely change my life. The first major fact that made me realize something was different about me was a biology class. The teacher gave us a lesson on the reproductive system. I kept expecting him to mention the two private parts that I had, but that moment never arrived. He only mentioned women's and men's parts, nothing in between. I was floored. Even though no one was looking at me, I felt like everyone was staring, like they knew. I didn't understand what was going on, how it could be that everyone else's body was different from my own. I pretended to feel sick after that class was over and was sent to the nurse's office. I didn't feel like I could deal with the rest of my school day. I felt like I was about to be sick and break down sobbing all at the same time. I must have looked really sick because the nurse got this worried look on her face and immediately called my mom. It didn't take her longer than half an hour to arrive, clearly rushing by something the nurse told her. Mom was about ready to take me to the hospital. I only told her not to when we got into the car. I explained that I wasn't sick. She seemed like she was ready to scold me. But then I blurted out the question I had been holding down all through the biology class. Why did I have different private parts than other people? Mom was clearly shocked by my question at first. A moment later, though, she sighed heavily. It looked like she had been waiting for this day to arrive. She told me she'd answer all my private parts than other people. Mom was clearly shocked by my question at first. A moment later, though, she sighed heavily. It looked like she had been waiting for this day to arrive. She told me she'd answer all my questions as soon as my dad arrived home from work. Dad was never home before dinner time, but that day, he returned extra early. They both sat down with me around the kitchen table and they began answering my many questions. They told me they hadn't revealed my condition to me before since they were worried I wouldn't understand it. They wanted me to be old enough, concerned I would be traumatized by the news. I was so confused and furious with my parents. I deserved to know how my body worked. It was so unfair that they kept everything a secret from me for so long. I rushed upstairs and locked myself in my bedroom. My mom knocked on my door and she tried to convince me to get me to talk to her. I refused. I gave my parents the silent treatment for a long time. Honestly, I couldn't even imagine going back to school and facing all my friends knowing I was so different from them. So I began missing class, and my parents didn't make me go back before I was ready. After all, they understood how big a trauma this was for me. Eventually, I agreed to talk to them once again. I was still mad and acting defensively. They had even worse news for me. They explained that as I went through puberty, my body would begin to change. I would develop a chest just like my mom. I was terrified, but there was nothing I could do to stop this from happening. My life seemed to be spinning out of control, and I was barely even a teenager. Bit by bit, my body really did begin to change. I kept cutting my hair short, but my figure began getting more feminine. My voice became softer and higher pitched.
My friends began noticing something was different about me. My features became rounder, and I didn't have an Adam's apple. They began mocking me almost daily, and the more girly I looked, the worse it got. They made fun of me and called me Justine instead of Justin. It was a really traumatic period of my life. I became really depressed, and even getting out of bed in the morning was a struggle. My parents had me see a doctor who explained that my female hormones were most predominant in my body. That was why I looked more and more like a girl each passing day. They couldn't have known this when I was born, or else I would have been raised as a woman. My parents decided the best thing for me was a fresh start, so we moved away from my hometown and bought a house on the other side of the country. It was also closer to my grandparents, and I was happy to be spending more time with them. That was when the rest of my family discovered the fact that I was bigender. I was worried they'd think I was a freak, but they were really supportive. At first, I spent a lot of time indoors. I didn't go to school right away since I didn't feel ready to face the world. I began going to therapy and was homeschooled for almost half a year. It was a time of great changes in my life, and I got to understand much about myself, spending more time with them. That was when the rest of my family discovered the fact that I was bigender. I was worried they'd think I was a freak, but they were really supportive. At first, I spent a lot of time indoors. I didn't go to school right away since I didn't feel ready to face the world. I began going to therapy and was homeschooled for almost half a year. It was a time of great changes in my life, and I got to understand much about myself and my true identity. In the end, I decided to go back to school. It was my senior year, and I was relieved to be around people my age once more. There, students didn't know me as Justin. They just saw a girl when they looked at me. I was also acting far more feminine and delicate. I began enjoying activities usually more associated with teenage girls. I dressed as a girl and was letting my hair grow. I was surprised to discover that guys at my new school actually found me attractive. They smiled at me and flirted openly, so it was clear they really did see me as a girl. It was so liberating, and I embraced my new identity completely. I actually changed my name to Julia, since I associated Justine with the bullying I received at my previous school. During this time, I became friends with several girls, and they taught me all about makeup. I loved it. I soon became quite proficient with it. In fact, I'm currently studying to become a makeup artist, and I think I'm really good at it. Until I graduated high school, I never dated any of the guys who flirted with me. I was too worried they'd discover the truth about my bigender condition and spread nasty rumors about me. So, when I met a guy I really liked, I didn't know how to deal with it. Jack was kind, sweet, and funny. I had a massive crush on him, but kept pretending we were simply friends. That was until he asked me out. I didn't know if I should just reject him or if I should agree to go on a date with him. I talked to my parents and my therapist, and in the end, I decided to give him a chance. But I didn't feel right hiding my identity from him. I could only imagine how mad he'd be if we began dating and actually kissed, only for me to throw that bomb on him later on. So I told him I'd love to go on that date, but first I needed to tell him something important. I imagined he'd freak out and leave, but instead, we ended up talking all night long. Jack understood me as no one did before. We've been together ever since, and he loves me just the way I am. In fact, he proposed a few weeks ago, and you can bet I said yes. My parents are so happy for us, and we are getting married soon. Nowadays, I identify as a woman, and everyone in my life accepts me that way. To my friends, family, and fiancé, I'm Julia. I finally feel happy and comfortable with who I am. It took me a long time to get here, but I know my journey of self